Ladies and gentlemen, we've got new polling to get to that have recently been done over the past few days on Alberta possibly becoming independent of Canada and then maybe joining the United States. Now, I've said to facilitate this, to make it go easier, we would prefer the Liberal Carney to win the upcoming election that's happening on April 28th there in Canada. Because then you would get people in Alberta and Saskatchewan who undoubtedly will be voting for the Conservative Paul Vier to become very angry. And when they get angry, there's probably going to be snap polling. They're going to want to leave Canada if the Canadians, especially the eastern side of Canada, overwhelmingly vote for the Liberal Party, even though the Liberal Party has a 20% approval rating. They basically forced Trudeau to step down because of how historically disliked he was. And so this is big stuff. Polls suggest growing support for Alberta sovereignty. Now, sovereignty is different from them joining the United States, but the thought process is if they did become independent, you would need to do some type of deal with the United States because you would need protection militarily. You would have to imagine. So you can see this, the first poll talking about, I believe this poll is just on the idea of, I think that, see, this thing, it's weird how they do this. You want to, you would like to see the question inside of this graph so I know what they're talking about, but I think it's down here. It says, do you support or oppose the idea of an independent Alberta, either on its own or with other provinces separate from Canada? So this is the one to where it's like 60-40. It's about 40% say, yeah, we want to separate. You can see strongly supports at 26%, and then somewhat supports at 11%, so 37%. And then in terms of opposing it, it's around 48% to 37%. And then you've got other people that say they don't know, they don't have a strong opinion. Think about that, 48 to 37%, 48 opposed, 37 support. That's not joining the United States, because now you're dealing with potentially some different things in terms of the baggage with the US. Are they going to get their universal health care, things like that? That's why this poll is better than just joining the United States, where less people are outright saying they want to join the US. Although you would think for the people of Alberta, them becoming an American territory is going to be a significant benefit for them, especially when it comes to protection. Also, you would think, unless they're able to do it independently, they would have a very nice tax situation as a territory. They would be a territory for about 5 to 10 years, and then they would be granted statehood after applying. But it's a multi-year process, and they'd probably be voting in the 2032 election if I had to predict. If this all happened within the next, let's just say, year or so, let's say Carney wins, Canada's a total mess, the people of Alberta and Saskatchewan are pissed off, Alberta takes the lead, they have the referendum, they secede, now they're independent, and now they're negotiating with the United States to joining the US, and Saskatchewan, then the dominoes start happening to where Saskatchewan falls, maybe Manitoba falls, and then you'd be engulfing British Columbia at that point, and they would come as well. And then that's when we would buy the 3 territories from Eastern Canada in a deal where we would just give Eastern Canada money for the 3 territories, because Trump wants that Arctic Empire. But when you look at something like this, this suggests if it's around, I mean, this is like 48-37 in terms of 48% opposed, 37% support. And this is really before the election. So imagine if the Liberals do win, those numbers are probably going to flip. There's probably going to be a lot more people supporting it, because they've had Liberals in office forever in Canada. The people of Alberta do not feel heard. And this is kind of like the last straw to where it was looking like the Conservative Party was going to get this ridiculous majority. But now with Trump starting this big trade war with Canada and saying he wants to annex them, it's brought out this weird dynamic within the Canadians to where they're more nationalist now, but it's liberalism. It's like nationalist liberal. It's like, yeah, we're all Canadian. We love it. We love being Canadians, and we don't want to be annexed by the United States. How dare you threaten us? How dare you threaten our sovereignty? We're gonna let in all the Indian third world illegals, and then they're gonna become Canadians in a single day. That's totally normal. But how dare you threaten? Like, that's what it is. See how weird the dynamic is? But I really think the Liberals are gonna lose. I really do. Carney is not a good candidate at all. Like, at all. And so it's like, listen, I kind of want Carney to win, but it just doesn't look like it's going to happen. And then you've also got the second question: would you support or oppose the United States joining the United States as the 51st state? And so you can see 67% strongly oppose, 11% support it. 9%. So it's about 70-30. It's about 70-30. 70% oppose it, 30% support it. But this is like the Greenland situation. What happens in these cases, if you become independent, we can give you an offer to join the United States that makes it to where we're probably going to convince a lot of those people, especially considering these are conservative people, that it is worthwhile for them to join the United States, depending on what we offer. And then they're talking about, well, you need to give $2,000 or $3,000 to people above the age of 18. I know some people want that in Alberta, but it's like, listen, Alberta is going to be a powerhouse, and if you want to be a territory, your taxes are going to be slashed, and we can also offer you a 1-for-1 exchange rate, Canadian dollar to US dollar. That's a significant boom right there. So once we are able to offer them, just like the people of Greenland, when we're able to offer them something, that's when the opinion polls will start changing. But this is about 70-30 right now. And then this question, the final question, if a referendum were held today to decide on the separation from Canada, this is a good question. If a referendum were held today to decide the separation on Canada, how would you vote? So would you leave Canada? 56% say they're remaining, 25% say they would leave, 19%. So it's like 60-40-ish. Although, there's a lot of people that are undecided. Tell you what, those 19% undecided would say they would leave if liberals win, I think. So it just depends. But right now we're dealing with, in Alberta, some movement. There's some movement, right? Obviously, most people still want to stay as Canadians, but it's not ironclad. And again, this is before any offer from the United States. This is before Carney possibly winning. And so if you get these things to happen, it creates maybe the perfect storm to where Alberta does vote to leave Canada and listen, if they vote to leave Canada, you would imagine there would already be a deal lined up with Trump and the United States to join the US rather than just be independent and go at it alone. And there'd probably also be a thing to where Saskatchewan would also join the United States at some point as well. Whether or not Saskatchewan joins the US, I mean, it doesn't affect Alberta. Alberta has to be first, and then I think Saskatchewan would follow. That's the point. And then you've got people of Alberta. Sense in Canadian pride dips as it soars in most parts of the country. And so that kind of just gives you an idea of Alberta and how different it is from the rest of Canada. The rest of Canada is all this liberal hive mind outside of Saskatchewan and in certain rural areas in British Columbia. It's all this hive mind. We love being Canadian. You're a liberal. Why don't you shut your border down and keep your culture and preserve yourselves? But they won't do that. So it's like, what are you even talking about? It's like this weird, these people don't even know what they're talking about. If you're a liberal, why would you say you love being Canadian and that it's so important to you when you're pitching possibly doubling your population with foreigners, which will totally erode your culture? Again, it's just double speak. So that Alberta is right. It's like this really shouldn't change, but it's like this fake sense of nationalist pride as a liberal. It doesn't line up. Your viewpoint does not line up with your current opinion, but that's just kind of the weird dynamic we've gotten to where with Trump in and threatening Canada, now people are more liberal in Canada. And so it's like they want to push back against Trump. So for them, it's like we hate Trump. We want to be liberal. We want to vote against whoever Trump wants to win. But Trump has said now he wants Carney to win because it would be easier to deal with. And honestly, it would be better in terms of possibly taking some of these provinces, because the conservative provinces would be very, very upset with a result like that. And they would feel very helpless. And then here you've got the Albertan premier coming out and talking to Mark Carney about a little production cap, saying they want more trade with the United States and for Carney and the Liberal government to stay away from the energy sector. These people are conservatives. They generally like the United States. The rest of Canada, Eastern Canada, they're all heavy liberal. They're more relatable to the EU. And this is the problem we have with a lot of these whether it's Eastern Canada, whether it's Greenland via the proxy of Denmark. You've got these places that are more in line with the EU, which is an issue for the United States just in terms of having proper relations with them. And that's really what Eastern Canada is. Western Canada is a bit different. And that's why we would like to take Western Canada, because it would be easier to deal with. And it's not even just for voting. Well, it is kind of for voting, honestly, because I have said that taking all of Canada it's not an option. it would not go well. We would not do well in elections. And you could maybe say, well, some of the people would switch. It's very unlikely. I know people, another thing that people keep telling me about is how many people, and how would this really work in terms of the dynamic of liberals in Western Canada be given the option or just straight up leaving, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, British Columbia, if the United States annexed those provinces and going to Eastern Canada. I'm not sure there would be a ton of that, but whatever, if they want to do it, that's fine. Well, the less liberals, the better. I mean, I don't have anything that's in general liberals, but just we would rather, well, I mean, depends how liberal you are, but we would rather have conservatives in the United States. And so if liberals in those provinces are mad, and we would give them the option, if they want to, we could facilitate them going to Eastern Canada if they still wanted to live in a liberal society and they didn't like that they were being taken over by the United States. That could happen. But Alberta still wants trade with the US, and I just think it goes to show you that they still want to have a good relationship. And it's also interesting that story on Alberta not really having a sense of national pride when the rest of the country is doing this fake whole thing about, oh, how we're Canadians and stuff, we need to stand up to Trump. Well, it's total doublespeak that you're saying, you're proud to be a Canadian. Remember 2-3 years ago when they had that trucker protest, they were burning, the liberals they were saying, if you have a Canadian flag, you're racist. It's a racist symbol to have a Canadian flag. And that's just how ridiculous these people are. And we see it in the United States. The liberals always burn the American flag, and because it's a sign of national pride, and they think it's a bad thing. So when you look at something like this, I do think when you're talking about possibly, to me, I would say this: 60% of the people of Alberta do not want to leave Canada right now. 40% would be okay with it. And then it's probably about 70-30 in terms of joining the United States. 70% don't, 30% do. Now, if Carney wins, it probably changes to about 60-70% want to leave Canada, and probably a 50-50 proposition on joining the United States. That's why it would be a positive thing if Carney won, because then you would get a snap, very angry reaction, and Trump could potentially take advantage of that if Alberta wanted to have a referendum within the coming months on leaving. Depending on what happens with Carney and stuff, he might reach out to Alberta and say, you know what, we're going to take away the regulations on everything and make it easier for you guys. But maybe there ends up being some negotiation in terms of the Canadian government to try and keep Alberta part of their country if Carney wins. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but what we have to think is if Carney does win, there's going to be a big sediment, and it's going to be a lot of hopelessness in Alberta and in Saskatchewan. Like, how many more years do we have to sit through this liberal government? It's been so long already. They had a horrible approval rating to the point to where their own leader had to remove himself because he was so disliked by the entirety of the country. But then they still win while installing someone who didn't even live in the country, and who can barely even talk, who doesn't want to meet with Donald Trump, who's like threatened, and he still wins. I mean, that would make them feel very, very upset. So that's kind of where you can capitalize on this situation with this Canadian election if it goes a certain way. Now, to be fair, I don't think it's going to go that way. I do not think Carney is going to win. There was a fake surge for him on Polymarket, and that's why they immediately called the election, because they were like, well, this could be our one big chance here. So once they got that surge, whether it's through the polls or through Polymarket, whatever you want to say, they immediately said, all right, the election's in a month, okay? Well, now Paul Vier has gone back up, and if the Liberals had a little bit of a better candidate, maybe there was a chance they could win. I mean, maybe there's a slight chance. Maybe you could get a situation to where it's the Liberals lose, but they're able to form a coalition with the new Democratic Party. I mean, I guess there's a few different things that can happen to where it could still end up being like maybe Alberta wants to leave, but if the Conservatives win, I don't really see a point in Alberta leaving, because they finally got conservative leadership within their government. So it's like, why would you leave now? But who knows? I mean, there's a lot of dynamics at play. It depends how well the Conservatives are able to govern, how much control of the parliament they actually get. So either way, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.